Welcome to our session Behind the Curtain, the Unicode Technical Committee. This is going to be a panel discussion. So we're going to try to give you lots of opportunity to ask questions about what is the UTC, how does it work, anything you might want to know about UTC, but you might want to know just a little bit so that you know what you don't know to ask about. So we're going to start with just a few minutes going over some introductory stuff about the UTC. But first we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Peter Constable, and I work for Microsoft, and I chair the Unicode Technical Committee. And these are some of our working group chairs. I'll let each of them introduce themselves.
Oh, I'm Debbie Anderson, and I am Vice Chair of the Script Encoding Working Group.
Ken Lunde, and I'm the Chair of the CJK and Unihan Working Group.
I'm Jennifer Daniel, and I'm the Chair of the Emoji Standard and Research Working Group.
And I'm Markus Scherer, and I'm the Chair of the Properties and Algorithms Working Group.
So just a few things. You may be wondering, okay, what is the UTC? What exactly does it do? How does it operate? These are some of the things that we're just going to say a few introductory things about. So we've already introduced our panelists, and some of us have multiple roles. So we've got different working groups, and some of us are involved in some of the different working groups. You'll hear about the different working groups as we go along. We could ask, well, who is the UTC? And I'm going to think about this in two different ways, because there is the Unicode Technical Committee as you can call it a plenary committee. And so who are the people that participate in that? But then the committee also has various working groups. And that'll be kind of the second take on who is the UTC. But first of all, the UTC plenary, who participates in that? Now, the Unicode Consortium is a standards development organization. It's not only a standards development organization, but that is one of its roles. And so in the UTC, you can think of the primary way it functions is a little focused on the standards development. And we'll talk about some of the things that the standards that it is creating. So UTC is one of Unicode's committees that's established to make technical decisions on standards and on other related products. As I say, we'll talk about UTC in its two perspectives. So this first perspective, the participants in the UTC are comprised, first of all, of voting members of the Unicode Consortium and the people that represent them. So for instance, I represent Microsoft, which is Unicode Technical Committee. Others are representing other full members of the consortium. There are also supporting members. So the Unicode Consortium has got different membership levels. And so for instance, Debbie is representing the University of California at Berkeley, which is a supporting member of the consortium. There are also non-voting member representatives. So we've got associate members who participate in the UTC, and they can participate in the discussions, though they don't have a vote on decisions that we take. We also have our various working group leaders that participate in the discussion. But in their role as working group leaders, they're participating in discussion, but not voting on the decisions. Now, they may also be representing a voting member, in which case, yes, they are involved in the decision making. And then we can have other technical leaders from the Unicode community. So some people that have been involved in the work of Unicode for a long time, and they contribute to our discussions, deliberations on things within the UTC. Then we can also have observers. So all of you that have attended here have gotten a complimentary membership, I think, to the Unicode Consortium as an individual member for a year. And so if people come and say, hey, I'm an individual member, I'm interested in seeing how UTC operates, can I participate in the meeting? And I will always welcome people to attend, individual members to attend UTC meetings as an observer. We've got, within UTC, we've got different working groups. And our working groups are, you can think of them as having one of two different roles. One is that the working groups are developing recommendations on the technical issues that the UTC will then be deciding on. But there's a second role that the working groups can have, which is doing implementation of our decisions in developing new versions of the standard or our various products that we're creating, the Unicode Standard, other specifications that we create. So what does the UTC produce? There is the Unicode Standard, which is the thing that people most know Unicode for, the standard for character encoding. But there are also several algorithm specs that are associated with that standard. And we designate these with, you'll see this acronym UAX, which stands for Unicode Standard Annex. And we've got several things, for instance, UAX number 9, the bidirectional algorithm, which is something that lots of software text rendering stacks implement in order to support correct display of Unicode text. The Unicode line breaking algorithm, which is guiding, again, text controls for how you can break up lines if a line of text doesn't fit within the width of a given column. Where are the right places that you can wrap that line of text? There's several other data files that we produce that are used in all of these algorithms to support the functionality, because the standard is encoding over 150,000 characters. And each character has got unique properties that affect how it behaves in these different algorithms. There's also several other closely related standards or specifications that the UTC produces. So then how does UTC operate? We get proposals or feedback from various sources, and those will get routed to the relevant working group. So for instance, if somebody wants to propose some new characters for encoding, that will get routed to our script encoding working group to review the proposal, perhaps help the proposal submitters in refining their proposal to get it in a good shape that it can be approved. The working groups themselves can prepare their own recommendations on issues that they see needing to be improved in the standard. The UTC meets as a plenary 4 times a year, and we just had our last meeting 2 weeks ago that was hosted at Apple here in Cupertino in the Valley. And then so the UTC is going to review the various recommendations, take decisions, and then assign action items for follow-up. And those action items will then go back to the working groups to work on implementing. And that could be, for instance, we've made decisions that affect some of the data files that get used. All right, then now we need to prepare new versions of the data files for inclusion in the next published version of the standard. So in fact, most of the activity of UTC happens in the working groups. The working groups are operating throughout the year. Some of them will meet quarterly, some of them meet once a month, some of them meet every week, and depending on the nature of the work that they're doing. So the working groups are really the most significant part of UTC. And so I want to talk a little bit about what are the different working groups. Again, in terms of roles, I mentioned the working groups are either providing input to UTC or they are following up on the decisions of UTC in producing the new versions of the standard or the other deliverables that we're creating. So we have these 7 different working groups. Script encoding working group that is taking in proposals for character encoding. The Emoji Standard and Research Working Group, the CJK and Unihan Properties and Algorithms, our Charts Working Group, our Editorial and Release Management. So we're going to talk just a little bit more detail about each of these, and I'll let our various working group representatives say something.
Okay, so the script encoding working group meets monthly. We meet for about 4 to 5 hours to review script and character proposals and document, as well as public review feedback on topics that are not related to emoji, because that goes to the emoji group, or Chinese, Japanese, or Korean ideographs. It goes to another group too. The comments and recommendations to the UTC generally are included in the quarterly report to the UTC, and I've got the link to, you can see the past set of documents with recommendations from the past. Proposals typically require several revisions based on comments from the script encoding working group. And this, I mentioned this because some people want a very quick response, but it usually takes several revisions and reviews by the script encoding working group before eligible characters are recommended to the UTC. Additionally, proposals, it's very important that they provide evidence of usage and technical details needed for implementation in order to be successful. And here by usage, I mean that every character should have evidence and running text in the proposal. And for modern newer scripts, evidence needs to demonstrate that it's actively being used. The script is stable, hasn't changed considerably, and the overall proposal conveys the sense that there is a need for public interchange in the script.
Thank you, Debbie.
Sorry, next is, sorry.
Sorry about that.
You can do emoji too if you want, Kevin. I'm okay with that. Hi, I'm Jennifer. Let's see, what do we want? I very helpfully put hyperlinks, which no one can click in this presentation. But I oversee the Emoji Standard and Research Working Group. We meet twice a week. The fact that you meet monthly, we need to talk because I don't know how that's possible. Like, we have to meet twice a week, otherwise we fall woefully behind. I think a lot of folks think of our group as a committee that just reads documents, reads proposals, but we do a lot more than that. We are overseeing, yes, we're providing feedback to documents, but we're really looking at how to improve the existing emoji set. We've all, I think, like, raise your hand if you've ever had a problem with emoji. Yeah, okay, it's half. You guys are blessed. You guys, I relate more to this side of the group right now. There's a lot of problems that plague emoji, so we are looking at ways to improve it, whether that's tinkering with the existing designs, adding new ones, thinking about how we can innovate on the encoding methods so we can add more variants. But in addition to a lot of that work, we do intake proposals like all the other working groups. We only do it from April to July because we get flooded with documents. And so we really need to contain that period and focus on other priorities for the rest of the year. What is not already said so far today? Good documents, good proposals typically see lots of revisions. We'll get like a document that has potential. We'll provide feedback, written feedback, and request modifications. Folks have, I think, 15 working days to reply with those revisions. We'll re-review and we'll go back and forth until it's in a place that we feel comfortable advancing it to the next stage. Documents that tend to be advanced to the next stage generally have high quality citation, good imagery, and are aligned to our priorities for the year. So those priorities are conveniently linked in these hyperlinks that no one can click. But if you Google Unicode emoji priorities, you'll be able to find the PDF.
Now, Ken.
So one thing that Peter didn't mention about the working groups, and this applies to all the working groups except for the script encoding working group, is they were formed almost 6 years ago. So what global event happened about 6 years ago? COVID-19, right? So Prior to that, a typical UTC meeting required 5 days, and sometimes we didn't cover all the documents. The reason why is that many of the documents and feedback were discussed in plenary, and that took a lot of time. So what we were forced to do was to form these working groups. So I formed what is now the CJK and UNIHON Working Group. Our first meeting was in April of 2020. So we meet quarterly. So as opposed to twice a week or once a month, we meet 4 times a year. And so we effectively streamlined the process. We took all of the stuff that was normally discussed in plenary. Sometimes we saw the documents for the first time during plenary, believe it or not. And we then prepare recommendations for the UTC to consider. And so the things that we provide recommendations for, first of all, we get PRI feedback. We also get public feedback when there's no PRIs that are open. And we also have
What the PRI?
A PRI is a public review issue. So for example, when Peter mentioned Unicode Standard annexes, Unicode Technical Standards, anytime we do an update, they go through a PRI process where we gather feedback from the public to hopefully catch errors in anything that's going to be added or changed in the next version. So right now for CJK, there's no open PRIs. There will be a new PRI opening soon. So right now, all the feedback comes in just as general public feedback. So when this feedback comes in, we then discuss it and provide a recommendation for the UTC, and this is discussed during each quarterly meeting. We also review proposal documents that come in. So some of these are for the UNIHON database to make changes or additions, and sometimes the proposals may be to remove a property from the UNIHON database. We do that from time to time as part of a cleanup process when we discover that either a property is a duplicate of another property or it's no longer necessary. And we also deal with additions to UAX 45. So these are the characters that the UTC would plan to submit to the IRG for encoding. And speaking of the IRG, IRG meets twice a year, and when they produce their recommendations, those have to filter into the UTC in order to get into the Unicode Standard. So my working group reviews the recommendations from the IRG, and in most cases, you can kind of consider it a more or less a rubber stamp. But in some cases, we sometimes take a critical look at the recommendation and make a different recommendation. This has actually happened recently. And in terms of managing content, we manage the UNIHON database, which is very massive. Right now, the number of characters that are covered is over 100,000. So when Peter mentioned over 150,000 characters in the standard, so my working group effectively oversees 2/3 of that. And there's also UAXs that we deal with. There's a total of 4. And also one UTS 37, which is for the ideographic variation database. And in terms of other roles that I have within the Unicode Consortium, I'm also the registrar of the ideographic variation database. So we issued the 9th version in July, which introduced the 6th IVD collection. So it's an ongoing process. And last June, I was appointed as the new convener of the ideographic research group under ISO. And I have to say that the synergy between me being the chair of this working group versus the convener of the IRG is very beneficial because I have visibility into both and I can coordinate everything very, faithfully and effectively. And I think one more slide. So yeah, I put up this. This is the homepage for my working group, and if you actually go there, the banner is actually animated. It cycles through 4 different versions of that particular character, which is in extension G, which is in plane 3. And there's also links to the ideographic variation database. I mentioned about that role, and also to the IRG. So a lot of resources on that page.
So we've talked about 3 different working groups that are dealing with encoding of different groups of characters, the CJK characters, the emoji characters, and all of the other characters. There is a huge variety and a lot of complexity in each of those spaces. And it's a good thing that we have 3 working groups, and it's a good thing that, Ken mentioned how we changed our process. We used to discuss all of these things in the UTC plenary. And so that meant there were times I used to sit in the UTC plenary and we'd get talking about CJK characters, and I had no clue because I'm not an expert in CJK. Now as UTC chair, I kind of need to know something about this stuff, but it's really, there is just so much that that we are dealing with that nobody can really master all of it, right? That means there's lots of opportunity for people with particular interests to specialize in areas and start contributing to that. This is just the character encoding aspect. There is all of the property data that goes with those characters and the algorithms behind them. So I'll hand it to Markus to talk about our properties and algorithms group.
All right. So Ken already stole my introduction of how the working group got formed. Yes, something happened in early 2020. Part of what happened before that is that in these lengthy meetings, we used to have several people gather on the whiteboard and basically fight over details of how something should work. And then we didn't have that opportunity anymore to fight over the pens at the whiteboard, and we had to do something else. So here's another working group that was formed in early 2020 because we had to do things differently. Also, one of the main reasons for why Unicode was able to take off was previously every other standard was published as pretty pictures, right? You had a code, you had an image. What exactly is that image and what do you do with that code, right? When you have a regular expression that says all letters are A through Z, how do you apply that when you have 50,000 or 150,000 characters? What does the letter mean? So Unicode early on started publishing tables of data and then started publishing descriptions of how to use that data to do things, to do uppercasing and lowercasing, to do bidirectional text handling, to do all the things that Peter already mentioned. And then when it came time 5 years ago to say, okay, we have this set of documents and issues feeding into the UTC that deal with the stuff that the other groups don't do, right? This is not encoding of new characters and scripts. This is not Han characters. This is not emoji. Someone has to look at these things. We formed this group that does the other stuff. And so we maintain the algorithms. Sometimes we are lucky enough that they are stable. We don't have to do much. Sometimes we need a smaller or bigger revision because things have changed, because we learned something new. But also, the properties, the data are important. There's, I don't know, that I have lost count. There's something on the order of 100 properties, aside from the ones that describe what Han characters are and how they behave. For all the other characters, we have to figure out, is it a letter? Is it an uppercase letter? Does it go left to right or right to left? In vertical text, how does it rotate? In which way? If you want to parse numbers, there are, I don't know, 50 or so sets of decimal digits in Unicode. You have to know which ones those are and what the values are so that you can write a parser library for these kind of things. So we take care of those kind of things. When we have some additional standards. So there is the Unicode standard with annexes that do some algorithms. Then we also have sorting and searching and how to deal with domain names that are not just ASCII domain names. The other thing that we actually work on the implementation side is that we have an interesting set of tooling, definitely not production ready, but serves our purpose for basically deriving properties. Sometimes properties are partially computed from others, and we have code to do that because it's error-prone to do that manually. We want to have things fairly consistent, so we are actually adding lots of tests. We generate a lot of the data files, we reformat the data files, we add sort of metadata and useful information to them. Back to where we started, a lot of what our work is looking at feedback, error reports coming in, suggestions coming in. Sometimes people propose whole new things. We prioritize that and report to the UTC for the next meeting and basically give a recommendation of we should make this change to that data file or this part of the course spec or something like that. And oftentimes we then basically suggest assigning the work to one of our team members and getting that done. And sometimes because we also work with that stuff, some of us are implementers in our companies, we also sometimes see things that could be improved, could be changed, could be added, and bring in our own proposals. So we are not just reacting and implementing, we're also bringing any ideas from years of experience of working with this stuff. I have one more slide. A little bit of some new stuff. I also have some pretty pictures here. When we prepare for a new Unicode version, we have to look at the hundreds or thousands of new characters. And for each character, there needs to be a value for each of the 100 or so properties. Sometimes it's easy because, we have a script and there are 50 letters. So we give them the letter property and certain other things automatically derive from that. Sometimes it's a little tricky. Sometimes we have to really look at, well, is it like this virama in this script, or is it like this kind of special vowel in that writing system? And try to give properties so that these things actually work in text processing, in line breaking, in all kinds of things. That's a good chunk of our work. We're working now on properties for new characters for Unicode 18, which should come out next September. We have a draft specification to do link detection and link formatting, also email addresses. We will have a presentation about that this afternoon. Somehow that landed on me this morning. So that's big, and we're doing this because, yes, everyone has been doing link detection for a long time, but everyone does it a bit differently, and that's kind of frustrating. And we think we can add something that actually adds value to the industry. There is another proposed draft on e-station spacing. Some applications already do this, but we haven't had a standard for doing it. So again, we have inconsistent behavior across different implementations, depending on what text editor you use or word processing. But in East Asian, like Japanese and Chinese typography, typically you want an additional visible space added between East Asian characters and other characters. So we have something in the works for that. We've worked a lot recently on security sensitive identifiers. Identifiers could be things like a programming variable name. It could also be a handle on social media, like your @ pick your name at Unicode, whatever kind of thing, or maybe a hashtag even. We don't recommend for those things to use any and all letters or script characters that exist in Unicode, because a lot of them are confusable. And so if you limit yourself to a certain set that is in widespread use, then you reduce the exposure for confusion and security problems. And so we've taken a good hard look at a lot of these. For example, the entire Han script, Chinese characters, used to be recommended because the Han script is recommended. Of course, more than 1 billion people are using Han characters, but they are not using 100,000 of them. Now we're down to a little under 20,000 that are actually recommended because they actually invite use, and that reduces the surface for getting people confused or even misled. We also sometimes look at how orthographies change or how things change on the ground. For example, if you know something about German, there is this funny looking character that's kind of a voiceless S. When you put text into all uppercase, there used to be a convention of changing that character, which is only what used to only exist as a lowercase version, change that into two S characters. But there are other conventions for dealing with that. Sometimes we leave it in lowercase, and Unicode actually added an uppercase version of that because some people in that typesetting had been using that for a while, showed that it was in use, we encoded it. It's still not customary to use it, but we are watching that space and we're trying to figure out, well, different people want different things. What do we do with that? So our group deals with that a bit. We also work with the CLA and ICU groups in Unicode to try to figure that out. And I probably said way too much.
So we've got three other working groups that I'll mention: charts, editorial, and release management. And these are working groups that are more focused on production of the standard as opposed to contributing recommendations on technical changes into the standard. We used to publish the Unicode Standard as a book, and it was probably around 1,000 pages. It got too big to produce as a book. The charts are a very large portion of it. The ISO standard, there is a corresponding ISO standard, and that is published as PDF. And it has all of the same code charts that we use in Unicode. And those code charts take up roughly about 3,000 pages, right? 150,000 characters, not surprising. So we have, producing those charts is actually a very challenging technical issue. And so we've got a working group that is focused just on production of the code charts. We have an editorial working group that is maintaining the core spec of the Unicode Standard. So when I said we used to publish a book that was about 1,000 pages, probably at least a quarter of that was not code charts, it was other text and documentation. And every time we add more scripts, well, we have to add some documentation about those scripts so people have an idea, where is this from? How do I implement this? So we've got a working group that is focused solely on producing that documentation. And then our release management group, which drives the process over the course of a year of preparing the new version for release, making sure that all of the tasks that need to get done, and we have a very long task list, making sure all the right tasks get done at the right time. So that gives you an overview of UTC. Let me just back up and I'll just there. I'll land on that page. So I'm going to give all of you a chance to ask questions, pose topics for discussion, things you'd like to hear us talk about. So think about questions you have. While I do that, I'd like each of the panelists to say a little bit about how you see the work of your working group connecting to end users. End users, yep, the people that end up, using devices. And
it looks like we have somewhat exceeded our budget for time. So if we don't want to get people away from lunch for way too long, we should probably
what time
questions.
Because
I think our time slot ends technically in 2 minutes.
But what time did it say it started? Because we were behind schedule.
11:20 was the scheduled start.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Let's take a few minutes. We'll go a few minutes over. If you have questions, I won't ask them to answer. Anybody in the room, questions you have for any of us here? Yes. Should be on.
Yeah, since the topic was behind the curtain, I was a little curious too about your personal experiences of working on these working groups. And one question that struck me was, as a percentage of your working hours, how much is spent on UTC?
Ken?
So how much of my so-called day job is spent on this stuff? Well, since all of my kids are grown and independent, I have a lot of free time. So I do a lot of the stuff on my weekends, early in the morning, in the evening. And the only time that this work would, I would say, interferes with my day job is like today, when I'm at an event. Or if I have to attend a UTC meeting, there's 4 per year. Or if I have to chair an IRG meeting, there's 2 per year. So those are the times when I would say that, you know, the time that I would normally spend with my day job would then conflict. But because my employer supports what I do, then there actually is no issue doing that. But I do try, to the extent possible, do a lot of this work on what I consider to be my own time because I have a lot of free time. Does that answer your question?
Others?
So for me, it's I try not to do a lot of that stuff in my so-called free time. For me, it's probably between 5 and 10%, partly because I'm the chair of the Properties and Algorithms Group. I'm the vice chair of release management. I prepare a little bit for meetings. I run meetings. I do some homework in between. I try to occasionally also do some of the homework and prep work that feeds into the recommendations eventually. So I consider that part of my job, and that's a non-trivial percentage.
And not as much as I wish it was part of my 9 to 5. It's a small percentage, honestly. It used to be my main thing, I guess, but the world has changed, and so my work has changed as a result of it. I don't really have a number. I've been asked this before. It changes depending on what cycle we are in the life cycle of emoji proposals. So over the summer, it's a little bit more because we're reviewing and heavily involved in the documentation. In the winter, we make our recommendations, and so that feels like some sense of closure to the year, so it can go back to 1 meeting a week. But then we pick right up and try to start planning for the next year. So it changes, but it's I wish I could spend more time on it for sure.
So I'm retired, so I theoretically have a lot of time, so I probably spend 10 to 20 hours a week, just related to script and coding working group. And I mean, we have a chair who does most of the work now, but you know, I'm in a supportive role and also my work on script and coding. Yeah.
For me, I'm in a position now that actually gives me more time for this work than I used to. And so as UTC chair, I do try to participate in the different working groups. I could only do that because I've got a role now at Microsoft that gives me more time. Previously, I was in Windows engineering, and so I had a certain amount of my time that I could focus on it. But my hiring manager advised me at the time, don't make your standards work the thing that you get reviewed on, right? Like when it comes time for rewards, make your product work be the focus of that. So I used to really limit how much I would work on this stuff. But as I say, now I've got more flexibility. I'm glad for being in a position where I can do that. Other questions?
What's your favorite emoji?
What's your favorite emoji?
All my children. I've been using fountain emoji lately. It's effusively, exuberantly expressive. It doesn't mean anything, but when I use it, I do feel like whoever I'm talking to gets it. Like the context really imbues it. It's beautiful, or I'm so happy for you, or I'm literally in a fountain. But yeah, so fountain emoji these days.
So I'd like to ask one question for somebody not on the panel. Anshuman, you've worked a lot, interacted a lot with particularly the script encoding working group. So Anshuman has written a number of proposals for encoding of new characters. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your experience being involved with Unicode from that outside angle.
Yeah, well, number one, thank you all for the work that you do and have done and will continue to do for us. Appreciate that very much, including you. You're not going anywhere, Deborah. Unicode Emerita. But I think I've encoded 30 plus scripts in Unicode, a couple emoji, and it's a very collaborative process. I think it's coming to the UTC with having done due diligence for a given script, following the process that's laid out for just the fundamental basic guidelines for how to encode a script. Like, is it a script? Is there a repertoire that's identifiable? And then working with the UTC and now also the script encoding working group iteratively to fine tune and refine the work product so that it meets the expectations of what we want to encode. That just sounds really dry and boring, but like, it's actually the individuals and the personalities that are sitting over there in front of the curtain that make the work worthwhile and make Unicode such an amazing process for me particularly, is because like over the past 15 years that I've been doing this work, it's working with the individuals that really make the effort worthwhile. Like the goals, getting script encoded in Unicode, it's not documentation, it's interactions with individuals, collaboration, learning, and applying those lessons learned to, it's improving what I do, document over document, year over year. So it's like the processes are in place for a reason. The guidelines for emoji are in place for a reason. You don't want to have to read 5,000 applications or proposals a day. There are a bunch of neographies that are coming out that are still not properly vetted or tested. And it seems like Unicode is like this monolith that is like denying proposals or like rebuking individuals for, attempting to like pass emoji off. But when it comes down to is there are individuals that are behind that are actually driving this and who are stewards of the whole standard, and they're doing it for a purpose and reason that benefits us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Anshu. So thank you, Markus, for being our timekeeper. Wasn't paying attention to the time. We are into our lunchtime now, and so we'll formally end the session, but I'm going to ask the panelists just to hang around in case any of you have some other questions you want to ask. Feel free to do so. So thank you all for attending.